We've got some stunning new polling out, speaking of the general election, that we can go ahead and start with and put this up there on the screen. I mean, this is one of those where one of the worst signs for Joe Biden yet. In the latest NBC News poll, Donald Trump is leading Joe Biden at 47 to 42%. And the top line number there for Trump is actually gone up since November. Joe Biden's number's gone down by 2. Let's go to the next part here, please, because this is equally important, where you can see the approval rating in an NBC News poll at the start of re-election for everyone for the last 20 years. George W. Bush started off in 2004 at 54%. He was riding off the high of his post 9/11 approval. Barack Obama in 2012 had a 49% approval rating. Donald Trump had a 46% approval rating. Joe Biden coming in at 37%. He's putting up Jimmy Carter level numbers in his year out ahead of the overall election in 2024. And Harry Enton, who works over at CNN, he's actually a pretty good polling analyst, flagged something which I think is probably the most important data point of this. This is the first time that a Republican for president has held a consistent lead in national polling since 2004, which is absolutely stunning. Krystal, I mean, there's a couple of things that we should go through here, and we're going to cover some of the pluses and the minuses. I guess today will be the minus side for Joe Biden. Approval rating, dismal. Approval rating, though, is not necessarily equal to the overall votes. As we saw, Trump could have a 46. You could still lose the overall electoral college. One of the problems, though, is that for Democrats, the ability to win the popular vote has been a foregone conclusion since 2004. Trump is now currently in a position, polling-wise, we don't know whether that's accurate, where he does appear as if he may be able to edge out in the popular vote. Given that Republicans actually have a -2 popular vote advantage in the overall electoral college, that's the worst possible position, I think you could say fairly, for Joe Biden, especially when we think about it on a state-by-state level. The only counter case I could give to you this is that, look, every election is unique, and I know that sounds trite, but H.W. Bush, in 1991, had a 90-some approval rating after the Gulf War, and he still went on to lose the 1992 campaign.
Yeah.
So it's not always one-to-one, but historically, that's more of an aberration than it is the norm. The norm is that when people disapprove of your handling on the economy, your overall job performance, and you're losing in almost every single national poll, then you're not doing so well. At the same time, special elections, every time people go to the ballot, they don't seem to be going Republican. So I don't know. I just want to present the fair picture of where we're standing.
I think the other counter you would say is what's unusual about this election is you basically have two incumbents going up against each other.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And Donald Trump also has a very low approval rating. So what do you make of that? I mean, I do think it is this bizarre situation where most of the country would say there's nothing I would like less than this rematch to occur, and yet we're staring down the exact rematch that is like the nightmare scenario for the majority of Americans. I think you have a situation where if it was almost any other just sort of normal run-of-the-mill Democrat, they would beat Trump. I think if you had any normal like run-of-the-mill Republican, they would beat Joe Biden. And so it really is a test of like, who does the country hate more? Who are they more dissatisfied with? Who are they more uncomfortable with leading the country going forward? Chaos under Trump, or, you know, someone who is incredibly aged and showing that age and declining on a daily basis to the point that he won't even sit for, you know, basic interviews and is effectively hidden by his team from the American people. And this is very, very, very apparent to people.
Yeah.
They've been telling pollsters routinely, every single time they're asked, yes, I think Joe Biden is too old, and not just Republicans and not just independents. Democrats felt that way and feel that way as well. And yet here we are, you know, with an incumbent president deciding to run for re-election in spite of the fact that the American people overwhelmingly feel like he is not really up to another 4 years. So that's kind of the bottom line of this choice here. And, you know, I feel like there's just a level of denial and insanity on the Democratic side. We might cover this clip tomorrow in the show. Dean Phillips finally got asked to go on MSNBC after, you know, he announced 4 months ago. They never once had him on until after Joe Biden has basically like totally locked up the Democratic nomination, just completely romped in South Carolina. Then they decide to have Dean Phillips on, and they're like, why aren't you doing better? You know, if Democrats want another choice, why aren't you doing better in the polls? And he's like, you literally didn't even tell people that I exist. I have 5% name approval because they did so much to shut down any concept among the Democratic base that there was any option available other than Joe Biden. And at the same time, they're saying that it is mission critical and absolutely existential that Donald Trump be defeated Yet they're putting up this guy who is like the weakest, lamest, worst candidate you could possibly have in there to try to beat Donald Trump. So it is a real level of insanity that has taken hold in the Democratic Party, where they have just anointed this man who is so incredibly weak, and where people feel so nervous about the idea of whether he can even make it through another 4 years.
Absolutely. And just to underscore this, one of the key themes of some of the things we'll talk about right now are somehow Biden, his lack of strength doesn't just come from independent voters or from Republican overperformance or enthusiasm. He's losing key parts of his own coalition. MSNBC, shockingly, aired some comments from black voters that they at least were probably taken by surprise, where they aired some of the criticism of Biden, and not only that, about why Trump support, at least marginally amongst black men, is beginning to increase. Here's what they had to say.
Some appeal there for some black men with Trump. What is it?
Money. Yeah. I mean, Donald Trump has a reputation of being the money man, so.
I just think that Donald Trump, in spite of all the craziness he may have in his head, reading some of the things that he talks about with business, I can kind of agree with as far as business-wise, because I'm trying to grow my business.
A lot of people admire the persona, and they want to be him. They want to enjoy the perks that he has. He seems to always be able to circumvent the rules.
You're hearing that too, that there are some people in your orbit who are either voting for Donald Trump or considering it?
For sure. A lot of my friends are obviously my age, so we're a little younger. We've only voted once, for a president. And Trump is kind of all we know. And they're kind of Trump and Biden. They're like, well, we were broke with Biden. We weren't with Trump. And that's kind of the only thing that I'm hearing over and over again, is that, well, Trump, we had money. Well, okay, I hear you guys, but personally, morally, I couldn't see myself.
Hey, very honest, I think, in terms of that portrayal. With Trump, we had money.
Actually.
With Biden, we're broke. I mean, listen, people are pocketbook voters. Are all people like that? No, not necessarily. As we saw in the 2022 midterms, people did not vote with the economy as number one on their mind. They voted with abortion and with Stop the Steal, very much so in order to have Democratic overperformance. So again, I can sit here and I can make the case every single which way, but I do think that there is a major peril there for Biden, both within his coalition. Second to that is a lot of what's happening right now with Israel, with younger voters. Let's put this up there on the screen. Politico's Jonathan Martin, who's a very astute political columnist, wrote this just yesterday, quote, "Forget no labels. Biden's third-party peril is on the left. Young Democrats who are finding U.S. support for the Netanyahu war effort is untenable, potentially costing the president millions of liberal votes." And what the major headline actually out of that is that, quote, "The latter is to include a multi-pronged offensive that will currently launch soon against Kennedy, Jill Stein, and Cornel West. Some of which will come from the campaign, some from outside entities. We will set this up directly. It is us versus them. Us is voting for us, them voting for a third party or Trump," as one Biden official has put it to me. So in other words, I believe that is called vote blue, no matter who.
Voter shaming.
Krystal,
That's
voter
the
shaming
whole plan.
definitely worked against Jill Stein voters and others. And look, I mean, at a certain point, I think people who are young in particular, and that's one thing that young black gentleman in the clip did resonate with me, is he's like, listen, I'm a young guy. Trump is kind of all we know. And, we've been covering politics, and I think about it for so long, even though I'm only 31, almost 32, is that it's been 7 years. That's a long time, And before that, it was Obama. It doesn't feel like, Trump in many ways has been around since 2011 with the birther conspiracy and has been kind of the center of a lot of our politics for so long that people no longer want to believe some of the myths and other things that are out there. Now, it might be true that the suburban, moms and white men, college educated and others may definitely be swayed by the Trump as an existential threat and others. But I think key parts of the Democratic coalition don't want to be shamed anymore. Younger people who voted for Bernie Sanders, younger people and others who I've met, who voted for Jill Stein.
Yeah.
I'm not sure they're ready to jump on this. They're like, I've seen this movie so many times. Why should I believe you?
Yeah.
I think that's a potent thing.
I thought the same thing listening to that young man speak, which is like, this is normal for him.
Yeah.
This is just politics.
Yes.
Like, the Trump era is all that he knows, all that he has seen of politics. So the idea that you're going to terrify him, like the world's going to end if Donald Trump gets back in the White House, like, it just doesn't have the same resonance.
Yes.
Because he's seen it and he was like, yeah, I didn't, it was chaotic.
Right.
He says, I personally morally could never support him. But he doesn't feel like the world is going to absolutely fall apart because, again, that level of chaos and like political insanity is just politics to him. That's just normal politics to him. In terms of the crumbling of the coalition that put Joe Biden in office last time around, it is a massive, massive problem for them. And I think J-Mart cites this in his piece. This poll just came out that showed 50%, a majority of Democratic voters believe that Israel is perpetrating a genocide. And Joe Biden obviously has given them unconditional support, done everything that they have wanted him to do. He has done. So, yeah, for voters who have any sense of morality, aiding and abetting a genocide is going to be a very difficult pill to swallow. And it's different than, you may not love his position on this or that issue, or you may not be inspired by him, but suck it up because Donald Trump is on the other side. For a lot of people, that is just a bridge way too far. And there's a lot of indicators that the Biden team has finally woken up to the fact that people are not just going to get over this. They're not just going to move on. There was another piece that quoted Biden campaign officials who said they are now looking for other paths to win in Michigan that do not involve Arab American support because they basically see like this has gone on too long and there's basically nothing we can do at this point to win these folks back. But it's not just Arab Americans. It's not even just young voters. There's a big piece in the New York Times about how many black faith leaders are disgusted with the Biden foreign policy vis-a-vis Israel. Actually, MSNBC had another analyst on who said, listen, when I talk to black voters, they say, what are we doing sending all this money overseas and entangling ourselves in all these wars when we've got problems right here at home? So there is also mass dissatisfaction across all kinds of key demographics in the base with regard to, his unconditional support for Israel. And I do feel like even if there's the ceasefire negotiations going on right now, even if the war ends now, that is not something that people are just going to get over and completely put in the rearview mirror. And I think they have actually sort of realized that, but don't know, but obviously like actually putting the screws to Israel or trying to change course isn't on the table. Instead, the plan is we're just going to demonize anyone who would consider supporting Jill Stein, consider supporting Cornel West, consider supporting RFK Jr. We're just going to say, but Trump, but Trump, but Trump, and hope and pray that that old playbook works one more time.
It's a really foolish strategy because, if you look at the vote totals, I have Michigan here in front of me from 2020. Biden won 2.8 million votes. Trump won 2.65. Biden only won by a margin of 154,000 votes. That's not a lot. I mean, Trump got 47.8%. So we're only talking about a couple of margins in a different direction, and Trump wins the state. Don't forget, he won by 10,000 votes in 2016 in the state of Michigan, which stunned a lot of people because of the election polling previously. But people like, was it Debbie Dingell and other voters? I believe Michael Moore as well had been like, I think Trump is going to win in Michigan. Same thing. I mean, let's say he has an enthusiastic coalition of people who are willing to come out, and you've got just enough people who either don't come out to vote, or they vote for Cornel West, or they vote for Jill Stein, or they vote for RFK Jr. That's enough. It really doesn't take a critical mass. It only takes a couple of million people in the right states, or maybe not even a couple million, let's say 1 million people in the right states, which is not that much. If we think about the overall, 170 million people who voted in the 2020 election, and things can go completely in a different direction. Everything is a game of margins here, and I don't think that the Biden team is really considering and thinking about that. I also agree with you on the Israel point because it's kind of like if we were on the 2 days penultimate to the withdrawal of Afghanistan, and Biden was like, okay, guys, I'm going to change course and we're going to stay. It's like, well, the chaos is baked in, man. We already watched the whole thing. It's like, at this point, now you just look vacillating and weak. And even, the political system as it's currently designed, they're not going to, even if there was a ceasefire or whatever with Israel, you think things are just going to end. You're still going to have a refugee crisis. You have all this diplomatic negotiation. Now we're thinking about 2-state solution. Are we going to recognize the Palestinians or not? What about post-governance. It's not like people are going to stop starving, overnight or anything.
Right,
This story's going to be here for years. I mean, that's the one thing is when the war initially started, we looked at this and we're like, this is a years-long thing now.
Yeah.
It's years long, no matter what. Even if you wrap things up, a ceasefire after 1 week, Gaza City is gone. So now what? It's like this is a story that's going to be at the front of the headline in the same way Ukraine is. Ukraine fighting there has been very down. It hasn't been as bad in terms of the front line. Everything's cold, etc. But it's still existential for the people in Ukraine. The situation for going forward. Are they going to be in NATO? Are they not going to be in NATO? We're going to ship weapons to them. What about the Brits and all of that? These things take a long time. You look at Iraq. We've been there for over 20 years and we're still haven't met. We bombed Iraq yesterday.
Yeah,
it's one of those where you cannot put these things back in the bottle, which is why the initial days of policy matter so much, especially to a lot of Americans and voters.
Yeah.
As we saw with the Dearborn, Michigan mayor, he's like, listen, if you don't want to do anything, that's fine, but maybe I'm just not going to vote for you.
Yeah, that's right. And this is a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat, who is a Democratic mayor, and he won't even meet with the Biden campaign manager because he understandably finds it insulting that what you want to talk to me right now about is electoral politics when I personally know constituents whose family members have been killed in this conflict. And you want to talk to me about electoral politics? Like, get out of here. And he was on CNN. He did an excellent job because he got asked the question, what about Trump? He was like, basically, I'm paraphrasing, this is not how he put it, but how dare you? Where's your question to Biden of why are you risking democracy in order to back this insane right-wing Netanyahu government? Why are you doing that? That's the real question to ask here. So, I mean, there's a lot going on here, but one of the things that I was thinking about is since Trump burst on the scene, he has become the central dividing line in American politics. And it's one of the things that I've hated about the Trump era because it basically squeezes out any of the real vision, policy direction questions that, that I would like our politics to actually center on. It just becomes about how do you feel about the personality of Donald Trump? And the Biden team's assumption is basically that is going to continue to hold, and he's going to continue to serve as this incredible force of negative polarization where Biden can basically do anything so long as he is not Trump. That anti-Trump coalition is going to hold together just like it did in 2020, and they are going to suck it up, and they're going to come out, again, enthusiastically, in high numbers, to vote against Donald Trump. And I'm just not sure that cake still bakes the way that it used to. I think it's worn a little thin. I think people justifiably have other concerns that they're worried about, and they're not willing to just vote out of fear anymore and the terror of potentially, what if Donald Trump gets elected? Because the reality is they've already been to that movie. They know they may not have enjoyed when Donald Trump was in office, but they survived. They got to the other side of it. And then there's this other aspect of, Trump is an incredible showman. And when so much of our politics has collapsed to vibes and theater, you got one guy who's charismatic and has swagger and another guy who they won't even let do interviews. So there's that piece as well, which again, I wish that didn't matter that much. I wish it wasn't all a show. I wish it wasn't all just the political theater and the vibes of it. But that's a reality of how American politics operates at this point.
Absolutely. That's really well said. And yeah, I mean, we would be stupid as analysts not to note that is very obviously the case.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.